Next is a resolution authorizing acquisition by the City of Grand Rapids of 163 Kent County 2013 tax-foreclosed properties and subsequently transferring the properties to the Kent County Land Bank Authority. Supported. All right, Carol Wood is going to give us the line on this one. Good morning.
Good morning. The attached resolution would authorize the acquisition of 163 properties. Those are tax foreclosed properties from Kent County and any other properties that have received extensions from Kent County Treasurer's Office that may end up being on the foreclosure list. The resolution would declare their acquisition to be for public purposes and authorizes their conveyance to the Kent County Land Bank Authority. City Commission Policy 900-44 guides the acquisition and disposition of tax foreclosed properties for public purposes, and we are carrying out that policy here. Included in the resolution is a listing of all those properties and the associated acquisition costs. The total amount due to Kent County for all of the properties would be over $1.1 million, plus recording fees estimated at approximately $1,800. The Kent County Land Bank Authority Board of Directors will consider at their meeting on June 26th the approval of a development agreement between the city and the Kent County Land Bank Authority that would contain terms that would require the Kent County Land Bank Authority to complete the redevelopment, repurpose, or resale of those properties acquired within 18 months of the city's conveyance to them. The city would also sign that development agreement with them, and the Kent County Land Bank Authority would have to deposit the acquisition costs no later than July 19th. Closing on those properties would occur sometime after July 19th.
All right. Well, the Kent County Land Bank is a important new tool that we have for neighborhood stabilization, and one of our members of the commission, Commissioner Bliss, has served on that land bank. I'll give you an opportunity to make first comments on it.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree that the land bank is a valuable tool that we have before us now to utilize for neighborhood stabilization, and that really is the goal. With the decision by the County Commission deferring any decision to work with the land bank to local units, I think it is incumbent on us to take a look at utilizing the land bank as we look at what is the best process for the redevelopment of tax foreclosed properties. In looking at the history of tax foreclosed properties in the city, it's pretty clear that these properties are significantly challenged, and that they continue, in the past, they have continued to be a nuisance and continuing to contribute to blight in the neighborhoods. So before us today, I think is an important proposal that we look at, to really look at is there another way to redevelop these properties and have a more positive impact on the neighborhoods, really with the ultimate goal of strengthening neighborhoods and stabilizing neighborhoods.
Thank you. Commissioners' comments? Commissioner Kelly? Commissioner Gutowski?
Thank you, Mayor. I am in support of this because the land bank can be a real economic development driver for the city. And I think it's important for the public to know that no public money is used. That was the Grand Rapids Community Foundation that stepped up and helped to purchase the properties from the auction. And I think for me, and for the general public to understand this better, there's a really wonderful analogy. Imagine that you go to a used car lot and you want to purchase a car and you are not able to look under the hood. You can purchase it, but then you will not be given the title. And that's essentially what happens with the state, with the auctions. So I think it really serves the public and the purchasers to have the title cleared, which is something that the land bank can do for them. And then in addition to that, the city will save money because these purchases, if by people who don't have an opportunity to go in and look at the homes, sometimes it's nice, but not a good surprise. And some of those purchases wind up being so expensive for those buyers that they wind up back on the tax foreclosure roll. So for us, that means that we have to go out and send our inspectors out. And I know that the city, in 3 years, I think there were between 400 and 500 properties that went to the county's tax auction, and the city had to deal with well over 4,000 code violations. So that's expensive. I think this is a way for us to help stabilize neighborhoods and pick up these homes and get them into responsible hands and stabilize those properties even that are next door. When a house is in bad repair, it brings down the value of their neighbor's home. So I'm in support of the land bank.
Thank you, Mayor. I am as well. I know that, I believe that David Allen and his team will be successful in this, but should they not, we're no worse off than we were moving forward. So that's a great reason in itself to move forward. Also, the fact that Commissioner Lowry says it's a good thing. I was surprised to hear that, but I'm glad he believes that. And most importantly, the reason why I'm supportive is because David Allen has done his homework, and he showed us what has been done in the past in regards to development and the lack of building permits being pulled and such, and clearly those facts lay the groundwork for what we're doing here today.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner White?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just think that it's good for the whole city. I think that it will help to spur business. I'm thinking of the small contractors who are around town. We'll get a little bit of an opportunity to get in on these smaller, because each one is a little bit smaller than the big mega projects. So they'll be glad to hear that. And when I look down the list, I see how much is in the third ward, and I say, well, we can certainly benefit from that. So I think this is a good program.
Thank you. We're from our banker, Commissioner Schaefer.
Yeah, question for you on process and the fiscal impact of the city. Because in essence the city takes ownership, correct, and then conveys it. We have to take ownership because the county has it.
Right.
We get paid up front for that. You had said 18 months for conveyance of the property.
No, 18 months to complete the projects. So whether it's resale, redevelop, or repurpose, they have 18 months to complete that process.
Okay. Because my question on that is when we hit that next tax bill time, what's the financial impact to the city if that property does not turn and still becomes ownership within the land bank? What's the implication for the city?
There would be no implication to the city because we would no longer own the properties. The land bank would.
No, I'm saying bank pays taxes. Revenue.
Right.
So for that next year, it would be tax revenue just like if a private owner bought it. So the land bank wouldn't pay taxes, even if they didn't transfer ownership.
I'm seeing David Allen shaking his head no in the back. So
From paying property taxes if they own it at the time of.
Right. That's the question I have.
David Allen, if you could come forward and just give us some clarification on this. Question being, property still owned by the land bank at the turn of the next tax bill. Is the land bank obligated to pay those taxes?
Yeah, Commissioner Schaefer's right that if you want to assess the risk, the risk is that if we don't get the property resold in a timely manner and we own it at the time that the next year's taxes are assessed, it would be zero. However, two things. Number one, at the time we purchase it, this year's taxes have already been assessed, so it's still not off the tax rolls. And as long as we can sell it before the end of the fiscal year, it's never taken off the tax rolls. And our history is we've been able to sell out every property we've listed on the MLS within 15 days of listing it. So our track record is that I would say with a high degree of confidence based on the process that we've put together that we will sell the vast majority of these before the end of this fiscal year. So there would be no tax revenues lost.
Okay. Let me just be sure I understand. And then when a subsequent sale of the property following the first tax billing would recoup those taxes from the prior year or no?
Yeah, if we purchase a tax foreclosed property, the tax foreclosed properties we purchased this year, if we still are in ownership of them as of January 1 on 2014, then the taxable value drops to zero.
Oh, I see. Okay. It is zero. So there's no recovery with the subsequent sale by the land bank after that.
No. But rest assured, again, I think we're talking about a fairly small percentage here that are at risk of doing that. And if you look at the sheer numbers of that based on the preservation of property values with the properties that we are doing, I think it's a good investment. Should that happen?
All right. Thank you, Commissioner.
Don't go away, Dave. You made a presentation before the City Commission on some of the properties that have been purchased by the land bank, some of the improvements that were made, and the gain for property values.
Right.
Could you just give a couple examples of that?
Well, most of the properties that the land bank sold, the ones that we did the complete renovations on sold at double their SEV, which is a really good indicator of a healthy sale, a healthy market, which really helps. And so now those properties are being used as comparables for the other people who are doing renovations or purchasing homes in and around those homes. So, our goal is always, wherever we go, is to drive the taxable value in that neighborhood, to push tax values, because that's good for everybody. So it's, our goal is always to push that taxable value, push the market. We just had a bank donated property given to us at 1305 Prospect. We got it free and clear. We invested $55,000 into it. It's a neighborhood that had been fairly depressed for a long time. We just listed it for $75, trying to, again, push that market a little bit. We did just receive an offer for just under $70, which for everybody in that neighborhood, that's a very healthy. The taxable value in that property was but the SEV in that property was $23,000. So I think we're trying to establish and drive pushing those values in those neighborhoods where we're working, which is good for the homeowners in those neighborhoods.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Commissioner Bliss?
Well, and I just want to add, and if we look at that in comparison to tax foreclosed properties in the past and the impact that those have had, or I should say, and the SEVs on those properties, if you look at the properties tax foreclosed in the past over the last few years, they have had a drop in their SEV to the tune of 30 to 35%. So again, if you do a comparison of the past and the past process, impact on SEV versus the potential impact on SEV looking at a new process in partnership with the land bank, there could be some significant differences.
That's very true. Tax foreclosed properties, whether they've been sold at tax foreclosure auction or whether they're recently foreclosed. So we looked at the 2010 auction and all the properties that were sold at auction. So now they're on the tax rolls. Their SEV dropped by 33%. It's from 2010 to today, whereas the residential property in the city as a whole only dropped by about 12%. So tax foreclosed properties drop at a rate about 3 times regular up. And so we need to stop that cycle, which is what we do.
Thank you very much.
I think it's also worth mentioning that in our agreement with the Land Bank Authority, they will continue to work with our nonprofit housing developers on properties in their interest as well. So I don't think that was mentioned yet, but they will work with our nonprofit housing developers as we had in the past.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yeah, question for you, Mayor, and why I asked that question is because I'm a numbers guy, so I want to have a full understanding. So is the thought behind it, and maybe I'll direct this to our body as a whole, because there is a risk that you take with this, right? Because what's happened before is we had check in hand from Kent County, and you had taxes paid on properties with no lapse. There's absolutely no financial risk to the city's budget that we have. So what the thought and what the theory is, and what's being proposed is that we'll actually see higher SEV values through this process. So we'll eventually get actually more taxes than we would before, if they can turn all the properties within 12 months, which they did with, I believe, 50 or so last year. They're looking at 3 times that amount plus additional cities. Is that they can handle and do this same thing. Any business that grows 3-4 times from what it did last year is going to probably not meet all the targets that it is. That's just what happens. So you hopefully meet some, but you don't meet all. So is the thought, and is this board that we're saying that we believe that there's enough data to support that increase in assessed value that we're willing to take that risk on some lost income of taxes if they don't sell all those within that next taxable year? Is that what kind of the theory is? What we're doing, and we're saying that that's based on their track record the last 12 months. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what
you've stated it. I think you've stated it well. There is some risk. Commissioner Bliss, you wanted to respond to that.
Well, and I don't know, City Attorney has had her hand up for a while to pipe in, so I don't know if Catherine wants to add anything about the
I think there's one additional element that you should be aware of. And David, I'd like for you to correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that the Tax Reverted Clean Title Act provides that when the Land Bank Authority takes a piece of real property into its ownership, while it owns the property, it's tax exempt. However, even after it conveys the property back into private ownership, there's a 5-year period where 50% of the real property taxes go to the Land Bank Authority, 50% of the real property taxes go to the city. So regardless of how quickly the land bank turns the property back into private ownership, there's a period of time, 5 years, where the city would be receiving only 50% of the real property taxes.
Okay. City Manager?
Commissioner Schaefer, I think, eloquently pointed out one of the points of risk, but there's another point of risk, and that is, do we have an opportunity to turn around properties as aggressively and have as much investment in them if they go through the auction versus the land bank? And so I think there is a risk, but there's also the potential for a much more significant upside with more significant investment into these properties by the land bank than historically has happened through the auction process.
It strikes me that when we, in the traditional method of disposing of properties with multiple owners with properties spread across the city, sometimes owners purchasing at auction who are purchasing their first rental property, perhaps, and are going to try this out. We've got with a single owner with a more global perspective on and a missional purpose to restore neighborhoods and stabilize neighborhoods through the repurposing, reuse, renovation of homes. I think that what modest risk we have in my mind is worth taking. If we find that it doesn't work, we will be back at this table a year from now, either considering the same opportunity or rejecting it. But I think based on what limited track record, albeit limited track record, but strong track record that the land bank has here in Grand Rapids and Kent County, looking at other land banks, with the granddaddy of those being Genesee County, and having spent some time myself with over in Genesee County, meeting with its founder Dan Kildee, I think there's great potential value for us overall with this, with the risk that we might take. Mr. Kelly?
Yes, and maybe David Allen can speak to this too, but I think we also have to take into consideration the costs of code enforcement. And I don't know if we've quantified that, but when we have the kind of numbers that I've read, that's a lot of staff time. So if we can eliminate that, that's got to be factored in too.
Yeah. Can I make a point too? 2 points. Maybe 3. I agree with Commissioner Kelly, and you look at the impact of these properties in the past that have gone through tax foreclosure on neighborhoods and city departments and enforcement. I think we do have to consider that. Secondly, the city has had a long history of pulling properties pre-auction and working with our partners in the nonprofit world to redevelop properties. So this is not a brand new process for us. We have a long history of doing that. And in the nonprofits we've worked with over the years, which I don't know the total number of houses that we've worked with nonprofits to redevelop, but I'm assuming over the last 10, 20 years, it's well over 100. That when they're in the hands of the nonprofit, they don't pay taxes on those properties. They're a nonprofit organization, and we don't get any taxes on those properties while they're in the hands of...
That's necessarily true. No different than with the land bank.
No different than with the land bank. Catherine, am I correct on that? If it's in, let's say if ICCF owns a property or dwelling dwelling place. They're a nonprofit organization.
It depends if it qualifies for one of the tax exemptions contained in the tax code.
Okay, but some of those properties.
Charitable institutions, for example, or religious institutions, for example, would be categories that would qualify.
Okay, yeah. So again, we've had a practice of working with nonprofits, and now we have the Kent County Land Bank as an additional partner to work with. My last point is that the Land Bank has a number of tools that they can utilize for the redevelopment of these properties. And Kara touched on them briefly, but it's about clearing the title, it's about cleaning up the properties, it's about making them available, listing them in MLS, going in and doing some renovations if they need them before they're listed. And then when people make an offer, to work with them and make sure that they have construction specs ready, that they have financing to actually redevelop that property. And I think that's really important for us to consider too, that the land bank has tools available to it that we as a city don't, and we haven't had access to those tools in the past.
All right, thank you very much. Well, let's see where we stand on this. Let me call for the vote. Those in favor of the resolution indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Aye. It carries. Thank you. Next, we have a resolution